Hello, welcome to the December 6th, 2022 Club Cubase live stream. I'm going to do a quick audio test, make sure everything is coming through as expected, and then we will begin. Bear with me just for a moment. Okay, everything sounds fine on my monitoring computer. My name is Greg Undo. I'm the host of the live stream today. If you have not attended a live stream before, how it works is you can ask questions in the chat field or send questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. When asking questions, if you could specify which Steinberg product you're running. So if you're running like Cubase LE, AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro. Also which versions, if it's 10, 10.5, 11, or 12, and which operating system, that information will be helpful. I won't be able to keep up with the questions in real time for a while. So if we could try to, if you have a question and you don't see a response quickly, I could be at times 20 to 30 minutes behind, but if we could try to avoid asking the same questions repeatedly, that would speed up the whole process so we get through more questions. And we should have all of the topics discussed in the live stream today pinned to the top of the comments field several hours after, so I'll have to watch the live stream again after a quick dinner break, and then I will have all of the different topics with timestamps so you can quickly navigate. But if you wanted to search for topics that have been covered in previous live streams, you could go to cubaseindex.com. And we want to thank Jan for his help in creating that website. It's a wonderful resource. We have two people that serve as moderators. We have Agent K and Jazz Dude. So they're not Steinberg employees. They just kind of do it to make it a better environment. So we want to give special thanks to them. Also, we another person that we should we should also give a shout out to Jazz Dude for all of his work with the Cubase Nation Discord. So there's a lot of great resources that are available for Steinberg users there. So once again, my name is Greg Undo. I'm presenting from outside of Washington, D.C. area in Alexandria, Virginia. And if I work as a product specialist, primarily focusing on Steinberg products for Yamaha Corporation of America, which is the U.S. distributor. If you're watching this live, or if you wanted to just let us know who you are and where you're from, if you just do a quick introduction, it's always fascinating to see where people are from. So with that, I'm going to pop out my chat so I don't have to scroll as much, and then we will begin. All right, so we see a question from Sammy the Ball. Hello, Greg. I've already installed the Groove Agent SE 5.1.11 library 5 times in the download assistant, but Groove Agent does not see the library. Do it manually, but don't work. What can I do to fix this? So generally, when you have different libraries, so you can look in. There's actually a little Steinberg library manager. So this is a utility, and you could see if you see the Groove Agent content here. So we could, make sure that it's being recognized at this point. If you don't see, and this makes the link between the content location and the plugins or Cubase, Nuendo, so the different sample content. But if you wanted to, if you don't see it, you could just open up the Steinberg Activation Manager, and you could see where your default location is for downloads. So let's say, open up the wrong one. So let's say if you go to the Steinberg Download Assistant, rather. You could kind of see exactly where the particular content is being downloaded to. And if you just come to the settings, you could see exact path where everything is going to be downloaded to. And once you know where the files are themselves, if you right click on the file and then say open in the Steinberg library manager, then that should make the connection for you. So, and also make sure that, you do, if when you're doing it, that, since you have Groove Agent SE that came with it, make sure that when you are in the download manager, that you didn't download the content for the full version of Groove Agent. Many of them would be similar, but make sure that you're actually getting the Groove Agent content, not from the Groove Agent here. So let me just... But when you select under My Products, that it's this content that you're downloading, from the Groove Agent SE. So we could just say the Groove Agent SE content, make sure it's that versus maybe the full Groove Agent, the non-SE version as well. All right, so we have a question from Patrick. Hi, Greg. Show CC1 modulation in depth, how to make sine, square, and more shapes into CC1, where it works, where it does not. Is there any specific settings or options? Do I need to check in DAW and VST? So I don't think that there's any specific particular. So let me just come here, just close that. So let's say if I have existing modulation data on this. So as we look, so I have my different data. So at this point, I could just draw in with the pencil tool freely. But if I wanted to grab one of the line tools, we could just draw in the and edit the existing data. So if I wanted to take this, and I'm just going to hold down the shift key to kind of change the frequency of it. Let me just... So we'll go to our sine wave. So I'm going to come here and hold down the shift key. And now it just kind of enters it in. So if I wanted to, again, come right there and just be able to draw it in. So let's say if I wanted to try a different tool, such as square, I could, again, we'll come over here, select that particular tool, and it just kind of is entered in. So I saw your video that you shared with me, Patrick. So it seems like you were doing everything right. So I'm not sure what could cause that. And if you could let me know if it's with every single part, every single event, or just within a particular project, that would be helpful. But let me know if I did something differently than you, Patrick. All right. So we have a question from Alexander Plasko. Thanks for joining us. Is there a list of standard key commands rather than the trial and error as far as picking one for a command that is already in use? So there are a number of different key commands that are listed online that you could search for. I think JazzDude usually has kind of a link that has all the key commands. But you could always, so at that point, but if you have doubts, if you go to the key commands and you're just looking for a particular function, what I usually do is just like Alt Control Shift or Command Option Shift, and then I will just kind of, enter the key command here, and you can see what it's assigned to. But there is some resources available, and I think JazzDude usually shares it as a little tip for new customers for all the key commands. So he may be jumping in and sharing that particular one. All right, so we have Sir Robert from Atlanta. We see JazzDude is on. We have Best Korean Jesus from San Diego, who's excited to be here. We have Cubase Index. So we have Jan. We have Benny from Sweden. We have Peter from Montreal. Vali from Vienna. where it's cold, he says. And we have Soren from Sweden. We have Robbie Bowling from Dallas. We have Walter Till, also from Austria. Mark Rabin from Montana in the United States. All right, so we have Sent Them from Malaysia. Thanks for joining us. And if you do learn a new tip or trick, make sure that you do hit the like button and subscribe to the channel, and that enables us to continue to do these live streams. All right, so we see from Chris Johansson says, hi Greg, please can you show how to import a MIDI tempo track on a session that already has audio? I can only successfully import a MIDI tempo track is the first track I create in a session. So let's say I'll just create a MIDI file with tempo in it. So let's come over here. I'll just do a new project. So I'll just add a quick instrument channel. Sometimes you may not be able to export a MIDI file, unless there's an actual MIDI event in there. So I'll just put a dummy MIDI note in, and let's say I add a tempo track. Okay, so now when we go to export MIDI file, and I'll just call this tempo MIDI, and we'll put it on my desktop. All right, and as we do this, we want to make sure, okay. So now we'll hit OK. So I'll just check to see if we import that. We'll make sure that the tempo information. Now, one thing to check when importing MIDI files, if you go to Preferences and go to MIDI file on the import options, you could uncheck. I think this is the default status is that the ignore master track events on merge is checked. So make sure that that is unchecked. So if I go to import a particular MIDI file, and I will just, we'll create a new project, and we'll make sure that the tempo information is coming over. All right, so you may not see it listed here, but when we add a tempo track, we can see all the tempo changes. Now, if we wanted to add this with a project that had audio in it, so I will, okay, so there's no tempo information in this project, just an audio file. And at this point, we will import the MIDI file. So it says, do you want to create a new project? We'll say no. And then we'll come over to our tempo MIDI.MIDI. And now when we, again, add a tempo track, we can see that all of the tempo changes are embedded. So, you know, it could be that make sure that you have this preference, ignore master track events on merge is unchecked, and that might have an effect. All right, so we have Don checking in from India. All right, we have Steve Leeds joining us. All right, so we have a question from Soren. It says, Greg, comparing audio, when I have an audio file and duplicate it, when I watch both in the double equalizer view, I see both blue and orange. The duplicate is not the same. Is it audio engine lags? All right, so let's say I'll take this particular project here. So let's say, okay, and I think what Soren is talking about when we go to the channel view, that we can see the frequency response there. So let me just come over and I'm going to duplicate the track. And then we could do a comparison EQ. So let's say, okay, so we want, so we have kind of, we could look at our two different EQ views. So they look identical to me as we do this. Let's say if I adjusted the EQ on this one, then we could see the differences like in the low end, we can see the high end. But now if I come here, you see that they look pretty identical to me as we do the comparison with the EQ. So let me know if that's what you meant, Soren, or if I did something differently. All right, so we have Ubakun. He says, please, can you explain more about the logical editor? I'm not familiar with it. So there's two different ones. We could think of the logical editor as kind of setting up different MIDI conditions for different elements. So, you know, and it's pretty broad in what it can do. But let's say if we want to do, there's a logical editor for MIDI data, which was kind of the origin of the concept, and then that expanded into a project logical editor, maybe around version 8 or so. So let's say if I want it, and that could do kind of more project and color. So basically what we do when I go to a logical editor, let's say I have a lot of different notes here, and I wanted to select all notes higher than, let's say C3 in this example. So we're going to go to our logical editor. We'll go to setup. And we have different functions. So do we want to delete notes, transform notes and change them, insert, select, or deselect particular notes? So let's say I want to select, and then we want to define what we want to affect at the top here. So we're going to set up our conditions. So we're going to say type is equal to note, and we'll have value 1 of note is, let's say, bigger or equal to C3. So when we look at this, now I could choose to select all the notes that are C3 and higher. But let's say I have velocity here, and I wanted to now transform all notes that were C3 and higher. So I want to change that somehow. And this is what the event transform actions is. So I'm going to say value 1 is the pitch. I want to add 12. So what that will do once I hit it is all the notes above C3 will now be knocked up an octave. So I'll just take all the notes above C3 and move it up 1 octave. So we could do that, or so. And then also, if we wanted to at this point just say I wanted to take all the notes above C3 and take their velocity, which is value 2, and subtract 30. So now all those notes would have the velocity of C3, and I could just take those notes down. So again, what do you want to do? What do you want to do it to? And what do you want to do? So, and what selection do you want? And then what do you want to do with that selection? So there's a myriad of different presets that you could work with the logical editor. So I often think of it as the kind of get out of jail free card. Like my first use, and I've told this a number of times, when I was like 21, I was doing kind of a rock band, and we had electronic drums with real cymbals. And every time the drummer went to his ride cymbal, it was triggering the tom pad below it. So we said, okay, every note of this tom, which is F1, that had a velocity lower than 40, delete. So I didn't have to go through and do that manually. So you set up conditions and then execute, and that's what the logical editor allows you to do. All right, so we have Michael Lindsay says he's London, Toronto, Ontario, but Detroit's his second home. I've been to Detroit many times. Been to Ontario a few times as well. All right, so I have a question from Val Lee. When I want to do tempo detect with audio advanced, detect tempo from event, it always says no tempo change necessary, even though it clearly is. Okay, so I'll revert this quickly. Okay, so I'm going to select that. So you go to audio, to advanced, and all right, so I'm not sure. Let me just check the path again here. It says detect tempo from event. So you could set tempo from event, but if you wanted to do the actual tempo detection, what I would do is go to do it from the project menu. So if we just come here and choose tempo detection, so now we've kind of done the tempo detection of so I don't see the exact so if you want to actually do the tempo detection, if that's the goal, Valley, come over and just, execute it from the particular project window. Now, once that's been done, we could just say at this, we could, set tempo. Let's see what happens. So, if we set tempo from event, so that was the event tempo before, but if you want to do the tempo detection, try from the project menu again and do select tempo detection there. All right, so we have Uno Memento, who's graciously joined us with as they're celebrating Finland's 105th Independence Day. Congratulations on celebration. All right, so we have Don Javes, just says, hey, composer from India. Sorry if it says switching from Logic Pro to Nuendo for film scoring. Congratulations, and welcome to the live stream. Glad you could join us. All right, so we see, hi Greg, I've been following your videos for some time. Your tutorials made a huge difference in my music production workflow. Thanks for your lovely contribution. Well, thank you for the kind words. Glad it's been helpful, and glad to see you on the live stream. It's probably, I think you're from Malaysia, so it's probably really late or early in the morning, so thanks for joining us. All right, so we have a question. So I see. Please, can you show a quick and easy way to hide and reorder notes on a MIDI drum map? For example, I import a MIDI track that only uses 8 notes, but they are spread out. Okay, so there is kind of a little visibility setting that we could use. So let's say if I'm all right, so now I will, so we look at the drum editor, and then as we do this, notes can be kind of spread out throughout the entire drum editor. So if we come over here, we can say show drum sounds with events. So once we activate this, and now I'm not seeing any sounds that don't have events. So you'll see this little icon in the drum editor. So again, you could choose to sounds in use by the instrument, but you want to just select show drum sounds from only events. So here, when this is turned off, we'll see all the notes, including empty spaces. Once we enable that icon, we only see the lanes for notes that actually have data on them, where notes exist. So let me know if that's helpful. All right, so we see hello from Amsterdam. Question, do all plugins work on ambisonic group tracks the same as regular tracks? I've heard that they don't work well. YouTube help with this, thanks. So, VST3 plugins do have the capability of working across whatever kind of channel width that the particular plugin will work. So if you drop a properly written VST3 plugin, it could, on a 5.1 or an ambisonics or a stereo or mono track, it will retain the channel width. Not all VST3 plugins do, but the built-in plugins should automatically work whatever channel configuration that you're working in. All right, so we have Andy checking in from Ibiza, Spain. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we have Don just ask, hey Greg, can you explain how to set up an expression switch with CC values for string libraries? So let's go take a look. Just open up a quick project here with some strings. Okay. So here we could have like an expression map. So if we wanted to see, what, depending on your instrument itself. So when we go to look at a particular instrument, so let's say I'll come over here to the violin 1. So, if it's going to be for different expression switches, it could really matter on what particular function is set up. So if you want your modulation wheel to do expression, but if it's more with switching between different articulations, at this point you go to MIDI and you could go to the expression map setup. So say we're going to go to violin 1, and you could make, if you wanted to start with a brand new one, you could just say, okay, let's click here, and you could have different slots, and basically you could have all of your different articulations, and whether it's a key switch that does that, or whether it is going to be, note on messages, or if it's going to be actual MIDI CCs to do that. So now when we want to work with this, let's say we'll take our violin one here. We could see you would go to the expression map here and load up the expression map for the particular instrument. And once that's done, you could just say, okay, I want these to be spiccato and to go back to legato here. And maybe I want these short notes to switch to legato and then, or to pits, and then to jump back here. And that way you could have it switch between different articulations just like that. So let me know if that's helpful, Don. All right, so we see Michael Pierce is crushing some drums to Sin and back at the moment. So he's lurking in the background of the live stream. Well, good luck with that. Make the drums believe. All right. And you see Michael Pierce is going to Amsterdam next week, so have a great time. All right, we see John Costigan from Kenosha, Wisconsin, and Michael Teams from outside of Dallas, Texas, Weatherford, Texas. All right, so you see that Jazz Dude has posted the key commands link. Thank you for that, Jazz Dude, and for Alexander. Chatfield just jumped on me. Find my spot. All right. All right, so we have Nick checking in from Essex in the UK. Thanks for joining us. Hope you're feeling better. All right. So we see from Walter Till, is it possible to open, for example, plugin of slot 2 in channel via shortcut? So we could do it in the generic MIDI remote. So let's say if I have a number of plugins. All right, so say if we're here and I have a number of inserts. So if we go to like the generic remote, so I'll go to Studio Setup and let's say generic remote. I'm just going to do hang on just one second. All right. So now I want to say, okay, we're going to have my panorama, and I'll just set this as my generic remote input. So I'm just going to say learn. So I want to have a particular key on my controller. So I'll have this key, and I want this to go to, I think we could actually just choose mixer, and we'll do selected, and let's get to insert 2. So at this point we could just say edit. So now every time I wanted to come over here, I could hit that key, and that would just open up that particular insert. And you could do something similar going into the MIDI remote. So if you wanted to now come over here. I think so. If I go to the settings here, and we go to selected track, and we get to inserts, and let's say we go to insert viewer. So here we could open up a number. We could say next insert or previous insert. So I think, so I have this for next insert, previous insert, and this button to edit the plugin. So if we wanted to come over here, so at this point, we can set that up in the MIDI remote. So it doesn't allow me to, and I'm just going to have the buttons assigned to edit the particular plugin. And then if I wanted to go up, that at that point we could just choose to edit plugins. So say, okay, now so I could say, I could open up the plugin, I could go to the next insert, and I could scroll through my different inserts using the different buttons like so. So if I wanted to open and close the insert, so I could go up and down. But if you wanted to use a MIDI remote to go specifically to insert 1 or to insert 2, you could do that as well in a generic remote. All right, Michael Pierce is number 33 on Smashing the Like. All right, so we have Kerwin Young also joining us from Atlanta. Thanks for joining us, Kerwin. Great to see you on. So we have a question from Mark Rabin. How do I embed mind-controlling sequences that induce zombie-like results? So it's definitely a pad shop function. So use pad shop. All right. Okay. All right, so we have a question from Gary Ward. Could you discuss the most user-friendly way to input melodic information into the score feature of Cubase 12? How would step input work on inputting triplets? Transcribing MIDI files is a bit tricky. All right, so let's say if I would just wanted to come... All right, so I'm going to select an empty part, and let's get to the score editor. So at this point, I think if we hold down, is it Option? So if you hold down Alt or Option 1, 2, 3, 4, you can see that it's going to switch between the different notes here. So if I want to put this into step entry, I can say, okay, I want to do quarter notes. So I'm going to just, at this point, as I play notes in, so let's say I wanted to do eighth note triplets. I could just hit T, and I'll just choose a different spot. So let's say, I'll just start over. So, all right, so let's say I'll just turn off triplets. There's keyboard shortcuts to switch between these. So let's say I want to do one measure of, and now I'm switching to eighth note triplets. Let's say to a half note. And I'll take the triplet off there, sorry. And let's say I want to do quarter note triplets. Then if I played chords, So say, okay, let's do more half notes here. And then we could just add different measures directly on top. So you could use you could have dotted and triplet value notes, but just hold down Alt, and you could just, hit 1 for whole notes, 2 for half, 3 for quarter, 5 for eighth, etc. And then you could just simply switch the values and then take tuplets on and off or dotted values on and off to enter it in. So let me know if that's helpful, Gary. All right, so we have the Coast cover band, Nordvik. Sorry, I'm sure I pronounced that incorrectly. So thanks for joining us. All right, so we just see from Pete Franco, what is the way to get a nice wide mix in Cubase? So obviously if you have more instruments that can be kind of spread out and panned independently, that's always helpful. So if you have a lot of instruments, just open up kind of a larger project here. So, being able to place different elements where you need. So let's say if I wanted to come over here to like the vocals, like in this track, we can see that so let's see if I may have a vocal group. So as we do this, we can see that these different instruments will be kind of panned out. But if you have a lot, if you have like 3-piece band, it could be maybe hard to do, depending on the sounds being used. But, if you have more instruments like strings, you could pan, vocals, you could pan kind of hard. But if you wanted to kind of take the whole thing and make it sound wider, one of the plugins you could use is the Imager. So you could just say wide mix for. So if you wanted this to be kind of wider. Or you could say, okay, I just want one band. I want the whole thing to be. So we can make it kind of very mono sounding, but as we do this, and you can see kind of the phase scope there as we just narrow it. But if you have more elements to pan and kind of, find a space, that can make your mix sound wider pretty easily. All right. All right. All right. So we see a question. Is there any way to compensate for the latency introduced by plugins like Isotope, Ozone, etc.? So, if they're in the mix, they're going to be compensated for. But as you record new audio tracks and you have, something like Ozone in the project, maybe on the master bus to kind of give it, that mastered kind of sound that people often use, while, realize that, we could see the particular plugin, and it will be, and if we go to kind of the setup here, we could see that there's a channel latency function. So as we would come over here, we could see that, what latency is introduced by various plugins here. And if we go, we can see that we're going to have that. Now, if you already have that plugin on, that plugin, the tax, we could think of it as the tax for using that plugin to get the sound. The tax is going to be the latency that it imposes. So if you're tracking while monitoring through plugins, there's no way around that. It's just physics. But if you hit the constrain delay compensation button here, what this could do, and it's just in the lower left-hand corner, what this could do is basically bypass plugins that are imposing latency so that, while recording, you don't have to have all the latency embedded during the recording process. So, but if it's just kind of like you're at the mixing stage and you have that plugin on, it's compensated for. But during live monitoring, that's when it's not compensated for, because that plugin takes, X number of milliseconds to process. So if you are recording while you have that plugin on, just simply, try to turn it off or just hit the constrained delay compensation. And then that could bypass all the plugins that are causing higher latencies. And you could set the threshold in the preferences by going to your preferences to VST. And then here you could set the delay compensation threshold for recording. All right, so we have a question from Don. Is there a way to permanently resize windows when exporting or opening VSTs? The windows are too big and I'm unable to resize it. So it could really depend on the VSTs, that the VSTs themselves can be resized. Often when I kind of get a question like this, it's kind of maybe that the screen resolution that's being used, is too small. So sometimes I know on Mac computers it may say that you're running one screen resolution, but it's doubling the resolution. And while it looks like, it's like, oh, I'm running 1920 by, I'm running, 1920 by 1080, which is what I'm running here. But it's actually half the size. So, try increasing your resolution. If you're on Windows, one of the things that you could do is if you go to the Cubase preferences, and under general, you could do scaling of the application. But, some plugins can be resized, some others can't. So. All right. So you see from Patrick, is going back to our question on drawing into modulation. It says, Greg, when you draw, I can see lots of dots, but while I do, dots appear for each bar. Can you zoom in and show while you do that modulation, I can't see your note length, quantize, or your key editor. Does it affect CC1? All right. So let's go back to my other project. Okay, so I'll go full screen on the editor here. All right. So let's see if I just... So I'm going to turn my snap off. We'll see if that has any impact. So let's say I have snap turned on. Let me come over here to my sine wave. So I'm going to hold down the shift key just to kind of change the frequency of that. And that is automatically done there. Now let's say if so that's with, with the grid turned on. So let's say if and that's with it off. So it doesn't seem like that has any impact on what's being written, the grid. So let me know if that's helpful, Patrick. All right, reading through comments. All right, so we see Soren just says he found out that the lag on his comparison EQ is from the control room inserts. He needed to press the delay compensation. All right. Thanks for letting us know. All right. All right, so we have Gerald Ely checking in from California. Thanks for joining us today. All right, so Pete Franco asks a question, how to get supervision to show the 180-degree half circle left-right spectrum. Okay. We just have it play back a track here quickly. All right, so let's say we have supervision up. Let me just... All right, so show, how do I get supervision to show the 180-degree half circle left to right spectrum? So I think if we come over to, it might be under waveform. So let me, if it's the wave circle, this is what you want. Or if you wanted to reverse that. All right. So the half circle left right spectrum. Now it could also be under phase. So maybe the phase scope where so maybe the panorama where it's 180 degrees. So maybe under phase to the panorama. And then you could see what's going on. So let me know if that's what you want to see. All right, see Michael Teams is proactively doing virtual ice cream distribution. All right, so we see a question from Steve Patrick. Says, hi, Greg, I'm Steve from Germany. How do I edit loops from Cubase Artist 12? So any of the loops that you want to kind of drop in, so say, okay, I want to go to drum loop here. So now if we drop that particular drum loop on a track, and then, if we wanted to edit it, I could come over and just say, okay, I want to take this part of it and reverse it. So we could just do processes. So now if I wanted to do different editing, so now if we play, and if I wanted to make this louder, if I wanted to do fade in, if I wanted to end here, or if I wanted to slide within the events, so you could do all sorts of editing and processing. And let's say I wanted to run it through a plugin. So if I say, okay, let's run this through Squasher, I like that particular sound, we can now do all that type of stuff with it. So let's say now I just wanted to delete all, and we could go back. So let me know if that's what the type of editing that you wanted to do with drum loops. All right, so we have Brian Sawyer from Beulahville, North Carolina. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we have a question. Greg, how long have you been using Cubase? Because you've become an expert in Cubase. So I've kind of grown up with it. So I guess I started 1991. So I was still in college at the time. So yeah, 1991. Got it before graduating college. All right, so we have Ralph Nelson Tucker saying hello to everyone from the UK. All right. Michael Teams wants people to smash the like button. All right, so we see a question from Brian Sawyer. It says, using UR816C and any micro instrument, even with gain almost all the way up, the sound is very loud in headphones, but recording is quiet and has to be normalized. What am I doing wrong? So one is, so let's say on this, I will, let's come over here, and I'm going to just check my audio connections real quick. All right, so say I want to set my mono in 1 to my interface here. So I'm going to add an audio track, and we're going to set this to be a mono track, and I want it to be mono in 1. All right, so now that we have this, we'll see kind of our UR24C settings, and you'll see this with the UR816C as well. So, and, check to make sure that when you're doing this, you could look at the different input channels. So it could be that maybe your input channel is down. So you can see these red channels. If you don't see input channels, just make sure that you click right here, and that the input channels, one, are visible, and that those, if this is down, it might attenuate all of, it may attenuate the signal that's being recorded. And, once we're here, make sure that, I think the UR816 has a pad on it. But you should be able to, once we're here, this is where we could access the different DSP effects. Just seeing if there's any, make sure that if you have, you could have disable phantom power here or there if you're not doing that. But, check your input channel gain here, and that could kind of cause the recorded signal to be down, even if it's monitoring at a higher level. See, Anders McCormick says more Cubase users need to know about these live streams. So helpful. So yeah, we usually post it on different forums in all of our social media as well. All right, so we see on the top of the mixer, how can I turn off and on all the inserts or EQ in multiple channels? Okay, so let's say if we're here, you'll have a states button. So when we look at our project here, so you could say, okay, when you do this, it's like, oh, it doesn't work. I think you have to hold down the Alt or the Control key. And this will basically, so Alter option, and then you could click to bypass. So when I come here, you can see that so you can see that the inserts will now be bypassed. So just hold down. You could just come here and just hold down. So if I just come right over here, so you may have to just turn on a modifier key, but you can see that as we just kind of do this, we could just bypass the different functions right there. And if you kind of hover over it, it'll tell you the modifier key to bypass. Generally, it's Alt or Option key, but you could set your own keyboard shortcut for that. All right. So we see a question, Greg. How can I export a Cubase session that will open in all other DAW? So realize that, there's two different ways of doing it. One is for MIDI data. It's probably best to export a standard MIDI file. For exchanging like multi-track audio, there's three methods. One is to kind of use OMF or AAF, and those are kind of interchange formats. It won't include MIDI. It will include, like I think AAF will include basic clip gain, but maybe not automation, because different programs will handle that differently. A lot of people will also just come over and just choose to make stems of everything. So let's say if we're here, okay, I just want to make stems of all the different files, all the different projects. We could go to export audio mix down, and then we could say multiple. And I could say, okay, I want to take all my instrument tracks, and we could convert these to audio. I want to take all of my audio channels. If I had effects channels, groups, and then we could export equal length audio files that can then be imported into any other DAW. So, but generally OMF, AAF for audio and like for some basic clip gain kind of automation. And then if you wanted to have everything just kind of automatically work regardless of plugins, you could do a batch export. And for MIDI, just a standard MIDI file. All right. So a question says, I'm editing audio in slowed down tempo to synchronize with a video, but the video plays in normal speed. Is there a way to play video in matching tempo from the audio? Is that possible? So generally, from a audio perspective, we generally don't want the timing of the video to ever change. So, Cubase, we can cut video, but it's not, generally the workflow is that the video is complete and there's inevitably an edit change that's going to come, but that the video is complete, and then we put all the resources to match the existing video. So we don't time compress the video or play it back. But if you do have a video file in the project, one thing to do is, let's say I'm just going to import a video file. Okay, so let's say we have video, but there is, if you go to the transport, there is something called the use video files edit mode. So if you're doing kind of like really, like very kind of detailed edits. So if I come here, let's say we have our video here, that, anytime that I make a slight edit change, so let's say, okay, I want to come here and, I need to do a fade out to right here, that, we can make the edit and have the video follow every single frame of the edit. So even if I want to do a fade in until we're here at the Steinberg office. So I just want to do a fade in right to this point. So this way we could do kind of editing of all of the data and have the video kind of follow. So it's not necessarily, playing the video, but if you wanted to find, a particular edit point where you can say, okay, I need to make a cut right here. And let's say, okay, now I want that to go until the coveted coffee machine starts. So maybe that mode of working. And again, if you go to transport and just enable use video follows edit mode, that you could place the MIDI or audio and have it, precisely synchronized to specific points in the video. All right, wonderful to see Grant Nicholas from Baltimore and Chris Hallam from Athens, Georgia. And we see Roger Cabo. Thanks for joining us. All right. All right, so we have Dave Christie. Hello from his sunny Cancun, and also now a new Nuendo user. Congratulations on your Nuendo. I've been to Cancun, I think twice I've been, so always had a great time. Seems like a good place to be on a cold, rainy day here in Washington, D.C. So Anders McCormack just asked, anyone else watch Dom Segalis? These live streams and his videos are invaluable. So yeah, Dom is great. Love watching all of his stuff. All right, so we see a feature request. I like to have a separate preset window for track colorizing based on track name. Text box enter name separated by drum, HH, kick, snare, and add a color selection box. So you could kind of do this. So let's say I wanted to, do something like this we could do this in the Project Logical editor. So it may not be an exact preset, but I'll show you what we could do. So let's say, okay, we want to, so we'll say transform, and we'll say name contains, and we'll just say, and then we'll insert. And for my Boolean condition, I'll add, and we'll say name contains SN or name. So we'll say or, and then we'll come over here, name contains hat. Okay, so let's say now what I want to do is I'll just say we're going to set color. And we could say, okay, set to fixed value, and I want it to go to this green color. So we can say color number 6, and we can have the colors labeled in the project color setup. So now anything that has those names configured, I could just come over here and just apply the color based on names for guitar and derivations for drums, percussion, and different naming variations. You could have all of those and just simply have that as a preset. So you could have all of your, and especially if you do the the track labeling, you could just come over here and be able to set up conditions like that, Roger. All right, so we see from Patrick, is there any WhatsApp group or Facebook groups over there? Because in Facebook, if we ask doubts people just liking and speaking unwanted, is there anything real problem solving app or anything? So, I think that there's a lot of great things that go on in the Facebook groups. I know I probably answer 2 or 3 different questions a day on there. But yeah, I don't know of an official WhatsApp group. As soon as you have kind of, a lot of those will be kind of user created, and it could be, a big undertaking to actually, have someone officially monitor all those different channels and stuff. So, and we also have the live streams, and you have my, you could always send questions to Club Cubase at steinberg.de. All right, so just see kind of further point on this from Patrick, because I get doubts while I work and I go to postings just to speak to, and people just to speak to themselves and what we want to hear. They're talking every other thing. So it's kind of the nature of any social media app, I think. So, but here we just concentrate on answering Cubase and Steinberg questions for you. My chat field just jumped. Just find my space. Sorry about this. All right, we see DJ wins. Just if anyone has a MIDI script for the MPK 261 from Akai. So let me just take a look and see if that's might already be. So there's the MPK 261. Looks like it's, let me make sure that's the right one. Yeah, so it looks like there's already one inside. So that might have come with the 12.05 update. I think there's some more scripts that were added for that. So check that out. But it looks like there's already a script that comes with Cubase. All right. So just see Patrick asking, Greg, can you show how to set up articulation like you? So if it's just going to be, coming to the, let me just open up. I guess this is with, if we go back to like our Schubert example here, just activate this. So again, you want to go to the MIDI menu to the expression map setup. Some instruments like Hallian, you could automatically have these scripts created for you. So Hallian is smart enough to automatically generate the scripts with all of the articulations and the expression maps kind of baked into the particular sound. So you could automatically import those. And then once we're in the editor, you want to load the expression map here. And then all of your articulations will become, so if we see velocity here, we could just go to the bottom and switch to different articulations, and then the expression map that's already created there will automatically show up, and then you could edit or record the different expressions in. All right, so we have a question. Can you show how I can add a plugin into the Cubase? So once a plugin is installed, and if it's a VST2 plugin, you may have to go to your VST plugin manager and then click on the settings and make sure that this particular path is seen. But if it's a VST3 plugin, it's automatically going to a particular path. And Cubase knows where to look for it. And then as soon as you go to something like an audio track, and let's add and go to inserts, you'll see all of your plugins show up here. If you're doing VST instruments, you can just come over here. Let's add, let's say, an instrument track, and you'll see all of your available plugins here. And you should see, again, going to your studio menu to VST plugin manager, you can see all your VST instruments and all your VST effects just listed directly there. All right. Okay, we see Graham Witcher on, so wonderful to see Graham. You see he's still transitioning, he's moving, so we hope your studio setup is going okay. All right, so we have a question. How can I select all channels on the mixing board in Cubase 12? All right, so say we're in our mix console here. So, so say we're in our mix console, all right, and let's say at this point I want to hide my input channels. So whatever tracks are selected, so if I come here and I just wanted to say, okay, let's select all of the tracks, we could do that. Or just within the particular track, so you can say, okay, I want to click in like the meter area of the mix console, hold down the shift key, click on the last one, and then all of your tracks can be selected. So if you want to do like a Q link, a quick link, you could do stuff like that. So, in the mix console, just come here and select, hold down shift, select where you want it to end, and then you could select all the channels in between. All right, so we see question. Hi, Greg. In the last Hangout, you showed us how to route selected tracks to a pre-made group. Is it possible to automatically route a track to a pre-made group by adding it to an existing folder track? So you realize that folder tracks can be independent of groups. So, because a folder track can contain stuff that doesn't pass audio. It could have, it could have a ruler track. It could have a marker track. It could have a chord track. So, so it's not necessarily limited to just passing audio, But what some people find helpful is if I wanted to take a number of different tracks and send them to a folder. So right now I have these in a folder. So if I want to send these to a folder and add a group channel, there is a macro. And don't be intimidated because I have way more macros than just about every other person. But there's a macro that comes with Cubase. It says selected tracks to new folder and add group channel. So if I do this, we can say, okay, I want it to be stereo group. We'll give it a name. So I'll call it drums. And that automatically places it into the folder and makes the group channel for you. So let me know if that works. Anders McCormack says he wants a mojito all of a sudden. All right. All right, so I see Val Lee says, personal question for Greg. What do you think of Steve Duda and his approach to music programs? Just ignore if it's irrelevant. So I'm not familiar with Steve's work. So, but if you want to email me a link to clubcubase@steinberg.de, I'd be happy to check it out. I always love learning from 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 different people and learning different perspectives. All right, so a question. What is the difference in pre-low cut and high-pass filter band 1 in EQ? All right, so when we come here, when we look at the channel EQ, we could have, our low pass, like a high pass filter here. And we could also have kind of a high cut. So we could say, okay, I just wanted to, or low cut here. And these are kind of two different stages. One is, we could think of this, when we look at this area here, this is this comes in before the channel hits the inserts or the channel strip. So this, we'll call this a high pass filter here. We could think of this as actually being before it hits any of the effects. So they come at different stages in the signal flow. So some people may want to have 4 bands of parametric EQ. So if I wanted to turn band 1 into a parametric and have, 4 bands of parametric, but still have kind of a high pass filter or a low cut filter, we could just simply come right over there and be able to have 4 bands. So while you can make them do similar things, they don't have to be limited, and they do come at different parts of the signal flow. This comes before the inserts and channel strip, and the EQ often is, can come, but often will come after it. You can reposition elements within the signal flow, but by default, it's going to be different signal flow steps. All right, so we have Mr. O checking in from Cali, Colombia. Thanks for joining us. Mr. O is like number 64. That was 50 minutes after the hour, maybe about a half hour ago, or 35 minutes. I have to catch up. All right. All right, so we have Kionra Music from Perth, Western Australia, looking at getting Cubase Pro. Been using Cakewalk by BandLab for the past year. Welcome to the live stream, and thanks for joining us from Australia. So it's always wonderful. It's my favorite country I've visited. So I didn't get to make it to Perth, but I have some friends from Perth. Thanks for joining us, and let us know any questions that you have. All right, Michael Teams wants everyone to whack the like button so I can be gainfully employed and keep the Hangouts going. Just reading through comments. All right, so we see Ubikun just waiting for a logical editor link. So you could check out, if you go to the Cubase YouTube channel, there's different logical editor presets tutorials that I've done there. Okay, so we have a question from Jovanovic 3D. Says, "Hi Greg, I'm interested in Halligan Sonic 3 multi-tab, not mix-tab. How to start multi-tab program? Can you add custom MIDI phrases? There's literally no YouTube videos about the cool Halligan Sonic 3 feature. All right, so let's take a look. So I add an instrument." All right, so I'm not sure if it's kind of like, let's say if I wanted to, all right, so say we just have, all right, so I'm not sure if it's the like the multi-tab presets that we see here. So let's say if I wanted to save a multi preset, at this point, we could, we'll just call this, all right, so we could just give it a particular name, and then we could just, be able to recall. So if that's the multi function, so this way we could open up one multi preset, and that could be like 16 layers or 16 presets for live performance use. So let me know if that's the multi-tab that you're talking about. And we just have a question about Halligan Sonic 3. Can you add custom MIDI phrases? So I think when we go to, let's say, edit and we go to our flex phraser, that these are fixed because it takes a lot, to do this particular thing. So I don't think that there is a way to add custom phrases, but these phrases are part of it. But if you wanted to get a particular phrase out, you could record and drag and drop it in. But I don't think that there's a way to create your own particular phrases. You could do something like that inside of inside of Apache or Apache SX. All right, so Bruce from Simi Valley is late again, but smashed the like button on his way in. Great to see you. All right, and we have Lawrence Koch checking in from Rhode Island. Thanks for joining us. Hope you're doing well. So we see, Greg, I know you can't say much, but can you give us a hint on Halligan Sonic Absolute 6? Is it near or far from release? Sorry, I had to ask. I would say it's coming soon. So, but I can't really give more information than that. So, Let's just see from Keonra Music says, I first saw a video on Logical Editor yesterday. That was the moment I absolutely convinced Cubase was for me. Mind is blown, so it's great. All right, so we have a question from Walter Till. Is there an alternative for IC Pro app on iPad? Because I can't find it anymore in the App Store. So with the latest iOS version that created an incompatibility with the IC Pro app, so it was taken off while they're working on getting it updated for the latest. While they're getting it updated for the latest version of iOS. So I'm not sure when it will be, but they're working on getting it updated. So if you have the opportunity to wait a little bit, I think you'll be able to use the IC Pro, especially with the latest iOS version. All right, so we have a question from Spy Girl. I'm at a loss to understand why the pen tool doesn't work for audio automation. I don't get a blue line to draw from, and all the pen tool does is erase a section of audio selected. All right, so make sure, one, that you open up the automation lane. So here we just open up the automation lane. Then when I grab the pen tool, my automation is just written in. Now there is kind of a pre-fader automation control that you can do here. So if you wanted to do that, but that's before it goes through all the processing, but just simply come over. So you can have a volume curve, but if you wanted the automation for the console, just simply open up the automation lane and then the pen tool should work. So make sure you're putting it into the automation lane. And if you wanted to see that particular automation lane visible, if we go to your automation panel, if you want to see the waveform there, I have Peter Frampton calling. I'm going to tell Peter I'll call him back after my live stream here. So I'm going to put Peter Frampton on hold. Great guy. Such an amazing guitarist. All right. All right, so let's go to the next question. Sorry about the interruption. Peter's been a big Steinberg user for a long time. One of my first concerts I saw. So I'm open up for Stevie Nicks way back when. All right. Okay, so we see from GM Splint question, how can I assign a button from my remote to pitch wheel because my keyboard doesn't have one? Okay, so if you don't have pitch bend and you wanted to take another message, so let's say I have I'll just add a quick MIDI track here. Okay, so now I'm on the MIDI track. I'll come over to MIDI inserts, and I'm just going to open up a MIDI monitor plugin. So I'm going to move my modulation wheel. Here we see controller 1. So I want to turn, let's say, this controller 1 into pitch bend. So let's come over to our input transformer. And if you're on earlier versions, you'll see like a little squiggly icon right there. So I want to, let's say we could put it on a track. And let's open up the panel. So we want to take type is equal to controller, and we'll say value 1 of that controller. So we're going to do controller 1. So we'll say MIDI controller equals 1. And we want to choose transform. And let's see if we could just turn this into type. And let's set to fixed value and say pitch bend. Okay, so now when we go to the MIDI monitor plugin, let's see if this works. So now my modulation wheel, so whatever controller that is being spit out, so if I turn this off, it's now controller 1. So I say I want to take type is equal to controller and whatever controller is being transmitted. And then under the event transform actions, you're going to say type, we will set to fixed value, and then we'll set it to pitch bend. So you could just draw it in right there. So that way, whatever value is being transmitted, you want to just simply have this in this line for that particular MIDI CC, and then you could transform that CC into MIDI pitch bend data. All right, so you see Lawrence Koch is working on a new sound system for Temple. So I have some friends that work there from college. I'm faculty there. Oh, I'm sorry, he's putting the sound system in a Temple, sorry. Good luck with the project. I was thinking of the college in Philadelphia. So. All right. My chat field jumped. All right, so I think I'm back to where I was. All right, so we just see, Greg, how can I synchronize audio to video when video always plays the same speed? Can I slow it down and have audio in musical mode to get it more precise? Is it possible? So, if it's for editing, like, just what we showed earlier with the, video follows edit mode from the transport, but that way you can get precise placement to the video, but we're not going to change the speed of the video. See, the tempo that Lawrence is working on is 75 feet by 75 feet. He's doing new audio processing and touchpad control. All right, so we have Thomas Niwa, who's also from Vienna. Thanks for joining us. All right, so we just see question, how do you get sample libraries loud enough to export without clipping or too much pre-gain? So a lot of times, when people run into issues with like sample libraries is sometimes people may, try to artificially like add gain when there's like maybe an expression control. So let's say if I'm in Hallyan Sonic and I just want to go to a Hallyan Symphonic Orchestra. Let's see if I have it in here. Yeah. All right. So let's say I wanted to go to, we'll do an oboe patch in honor of Jeff Zabelski. All right. So let's say, so sometimes, many times when you go to work with sample libraries, you know, like if it sounds weak when you're doing it, you know, try adjusting, like, you know, maybe called something like an expression controller. So a lot of times, you know, sample libraries won't be based on velocity, but by how loud this particular control is. So if you come here, so make sure that you have, you know, the proper device that's controlling the dynamics and the expression, the expressiveness of the particular instrument, and make sure you have that dialed in first. And then you shouldn't really have any other kind of traditional gain adjustments. But usually when I get questions like that, it's when people are trying to artificially boost it, and it's like, oh, move your mod wheel up. It's like, oh, and then that could be the big epiphany. All right, so we have Travel with Hand Feed. This is greetings from LA. So thanks for joining us. All right, so we just have a question from Bernd Fruerberg. I'm trying out Cubase. I've been using Pro Tools for years. Just wondering why other DAWs, Cubase included, doesn't use like Smart Tool for a solution for different tasks. So I think that there is kind of a Smart Tool with this. So if we come over and let's just say I want to take this audio clip here, and we go to combined mode. So when we're in combined mode, I could take when I'm at the top, we could be in a range selection mode or an object selection mode when we go to the bottom. So if I wanted to come right over here, say, okay, I want to do a fade out, but I want to take this part and duplicate it, we could just hit Control D. Anytime that I'm in the lower zone part and I hold down like the Alt or Option, I could split, I can adjust my volume, my clip gain directly here. I could just come over and adjust kind of my start. If I wanted to do a fade out, if I wanted to hold down Alt and Control or Option and Command, we could slip the audio within the contents. So there's lots of, you know, really, you know, different smart controls that you could do directly when you have the combined tools working that people don't know. I did like kind of maybe like a 7 or 8 minute video kind of detailing these. So, but when you have kind of like the range selection tool, so I just want to delete that, just hitting the delete key, we could do stuff like that. And now I wanted to take this and, you know, let's say, okay, I just want to take this and duplicate it at the end. We could do stuff like that. And let's say I want to, you know, switch my object sizing mode. So we can say, okay, I want that little amplitude just to come there. And now I just wanted to, so you can see that as we go to different areas that there's a lot of different functionality. And of course we have your unlimited levels of undo. So while it's not technically called a smart tool, it gives you the same functionality, I think. All right, so we just see from a question, will Steinberg be having any sales during the holidays? Hate I missed a 40% off Cubase a few months ago. So, you know, generally there's different promotions that are constantly cycling in and out. So every month there's kind of a different promotion that's going on. So I'm not sure if you'll see the 40% off for the holidays. We just finished one, the Cyber Week sale. We just finished that. See, Vanilla RPG soundtracks. The actual Peter Frampton? Yeah, that was the actual Peter Frampton. So I'll have to call him back right after. All right, so we just see Greg share techniques to mix in Cubase because it feels like confusing how to easily mix with more tracks. And what method do you use to mix? They're huge projects. What's the process? It would be more helpful. So a lot of times, I've been in sessions. I remember one time I was with Michael Wagner, who's he's kind of retired now, but he's probably sold over like 100 million records. So he was kind of like one of the biggest hard rock engineers in the 80s. And one time I was kind of at his place, and he's a guy that will have 10 different mics for kick, 10 mics for snare, and somehow not get phase issues and stuff like that. So but and often it's just keeping things organized. So a lot of people may choose to work from a template, so we know that drums are in a folder, MIDI drums. This is from my friend Clay Ostwald, who did a bunch of the huge Gloria Stefan hits, and is just amazing. So he has brass percussion, congas, bass. So he has 2 bass parts, MIDI and audio. So he has a keyboards folder. He has piano folder, a guitars folder. And often with these particular folders, you may just, a vocals folder. And like he'll have parts. So he'll have just like, a lead sheet folder so that he could pass this out to musicians so they could go so we could just kind of see this as a lead sheet that the musicians would be using for that. So kind of keeping track of everything. So a lot of times people may put assign different parts from a folder into groups, and then that way they could adjust only one particular, like as they're going. If we slide over to the groups, I can say, okay, I just wanted to. Then once let's say, okay, I wanted to go to my conga group, I could come right over here, and then I could see which tracks are feeding the conga group, and just kind of bring different elements. So using groups is a really powerful tool for that. But it's just with any large project or any large template, being organized and knowing where your tracks are. I know a friend of mine that does a lot of hard rock stuff, and he's like, I know I'm going to have a parallel group, so I'm going to start off with one. Why spend 20 seconds adding one? Why spend 20 seconds adding this verb? Why spend 20 seconds? This is my go-to delay. And he starts off from a template so that he doesn't have to go searching for different elements, and it's always kind of loaded up and ready to go. So. All right. All right, so just see travel with Hanfi. It just says, having issues with my Wavelab update from Elements 11.1 to Pro 11.1. License can't find an eligible upgrade on the e-licenser, but it shouldn't use the e-licenser, right? So, it, so I would, instead of, where it goes to the E licenser part, so, Wavelab 11 was on E licenser and 11.1 had transitioned to the new Steinberg library manager. So you're probably not needing to use the E licenser at all. And it's probably when you go to enter the activation code in the when you go to the Steinberg download assistant, I would just, enter the activation code, and then it would probably activate it directly with your My Steinberg credentials, but you shouldn't need for 11.1 for the e-licenser to be needed. But make sure that when you go, so make sure that you enter the download access code here. So when we do this, that, we go here, that should take you, and make sure that you have the account linked to your My Steinberg account right there. But you shouldn't need the e-licenser if you're already on the Steinberg licensing system. See, Travel with Hanfy just says, by the way, I saw a blue Mercedes with a Cubase license plate here yesterday. Was it anybody in here? So I have a Cubase license plate for Virginia, so, but not for LA, but interesting. All right, the Heartbreak Time Machine has smashed the like button. Thank you for that. All right. So a question: is there any way to make / change the mouse wheel scroll vertically without the need to hold Shift? Super annoying when I need to scroll it and change the mixer volume instead. So it's. All right. So one of the things you do if you accidentally just kind of grab this, I know we're having kind of discussions on best implementation of this, but if you accidentally like moved the fader the wrong way, there is a mix console undo history, just so you know. So it's I just grab this, click on here, or hit Alt or Option plus Z, and then you could undo the mix console. So I know that they're kind of reviewing this for future versions. But so try, if you do remove, if you do accidentally move it, just hit the Alt or Option plus Z. And we have a question also: when trying to scroll my insert horizontally, I have to go to the side to make it work. Am I missing something? So I'm not sure if we're here, but anywhere that I'm in the lower area, I could scroll through my inserts horizontally. So let me know if I misunderstood. All right, so we see from Whistle Music how to improve the transport function. I just upgraded to Cubase 12 Pro from Nuendo 4, and I'm having issues with the default transport settings. So sometimes I think the default transport settings may look like this. So if you wanted more like to see rewind and fast forward, you could just kind of grab the little 3 dots to the right and move it over. And then there's a whole settings so that you could choose which functions are available on the transport. So, version 4 was a, kind of a floating transport. And, I always felt it was kind of, I spent a lot of time moving the transport around. So you could still have that by hitting F2. But, try if it's just like, if there's a particular transport function, or if you're just not seeing all the buttons you expect, you could just kind of, where you see the three dots, you could expand to see more information that maybe you need to access once or twice, but you don't need to see all of the time. So, but if there's a particular transport function that you can't figure out, just let me know with whistle music. All right, wonderful to have Mark Winslow saying aloha from Hawaii. All right, so we see from Sydney Thurston, whoa, that was cool, the combine button. Now I know what that button does. Thank you again for the new to me info. All right, Michael Teams is the revelation of the day, the combi tool. All right, so just reading through. All right, so we see question, besides an i7 processor with 48 gigs of RAM and a gigabit Ethernet adapter, what else would I need to record 50 channels from my mixer to Cubase 12 Pro? So I'm not sure which audio interface that you're running. So if it's, we have a lot of people when they're doing 50 plus tracks that will do like a Dante system or like an AVB system. So if you have, I just saw that you mentioned the gigabit Ethernet adapter. So with Dante, I think you could do, 64 or 128 tracks with the Dante virtual sound, with the DVS, the Dante virtual sound card. So, but if you could let us know which mixer and which audio interface you have, that can make a difference. But if it's a Dante based thing, then you should be able to go straight in pretty easily. All right, so you just see Travel with Hamfy just says it automatically starts the e-licenser. So check to see if you have it in your Steinberg Activation Manager, which is a separate program. And I'm not sure if you had the Cubase Elements on e-licenser or if it was on the Steinberg licensing system. So that could make a difference as well. All right, so Michael Pierce has suitably crushed his drums in this project, so that's good. Glad he could come back and join us. All right, so we have a question from the Studio International. Hi, Greg. Is there any way of running my new Montage 8 keyboard interface with my UR824 interface at the same time? Cubase 12 Pro, Windows 11. So, because both of them are using USB for the audio communication, USB doesn't allow multiple audio interfaces to be stacked. So we used to be able to do that on FireWire. So if you had like the Yamaha Steinberg FireWire driver and you had the older motif that had FireWire output, you could do that and stack multiple interfaces, but that was just that the FireWire protocol allowed for multiple audio interfaces to be stacked and not on USB. You can take the outputs from your Montage and connect it into your UR824, but you're not going to be running both audio interfaces from the Montage and the UR824 at the same time, and they're not going to be able to clock because I don't think that you even have I don't think you have a word clock out on the Montage. Okay, so you see from Burnt about scrolling with the inserts, you meant scrolling to see more inserts. So, just, okay, so I see where you kind of come over here to the right to scroll up and down, but let's see if yeah, so if you're on the inserts, you could just hit looks like you could just hit the arrows keys to navigate, but if you're over here, yeah, it looks like you just have to be on this right to scroll vertically there. So sorry for misunderstanding. All right, so we see from Stefan Carlos Benson, is there a way to simultaneously move the cursor to the start and scroll to the start at the same time? All right. So I'm going to see if I could understand this. So let's say, all right, so is there a way to simultaneously move the cursor to the start and scroll to the start at the same time? So if we are in this transport mode, you use video files edit mode. Anytime that you select an event, that moves the cursor. So, but let's see if we select it with like scrub. So, so if I come here, let's say if I have the scrub wheel that anytime, so, here this is kind of based on the position. So I'm not sure if you're trying to just scrub like, the audio, so we could have it automatically, switch to the start of the event with this, but the scrub is kind of automatically based on where you physically click within the waveform. So, but maybe I'm afraid I might be misunderstanding, but if you want to let me know. And maybe give me an example or maybe ask the question a different way. Sorry about that. All right, so we see Mark Winslow's doing Dante with the Yamaha TF3. So the question is, will the computer handle 50 tracks of live recording? So yeah, it should be no problem. I can remember doing, I got to work with, I was one of the audio engineers on the Eric Clapton's Crossroads Festival in Dallas in 2004. So, and this is, it was 18 years ago. At that point, we did, I think we did 48 tracks at 24-bit 96K audio for 17 hours at the computers 18 years ago. So I don't think you'll have a problem, Mark, with that. All right. All right. So we see question: is there a way to automate a MIDI insert ARP5 to switch between step size or steps? I couldn't find one. Let's take a quick look. Just jump back to a different project. Thanks for all the great questions. And if you learned something new, make sure you hit the like button and subscribe to the channel. It's pretty inexpensive. All right, so let's say we're in the MIDI inserts. Let's get to make sure I'm in the right plugin. All right, so to do the step size. All right, so I don't think I'll just try quick control out of curiosity. Okay, yeah, so this is my new thing I learned. All right, so let's say we have our step size here. We can now have the quick, so I just click on learn with the quick control. And now my quick control, so click on learn. So I just click on learn here, and then let's go to our step size. And then as soon as I select a particular parameter here, that's going to capture it. So we'll say step size. So now my first quick control, and I could use my quick control, and that way I could automate the particular step size right there, just using one of the quick controls for that particular function. So again, open up the plugin, go to like your quick control. So even if we just delete all, you know, we could just come over here, click on the little L button, and now we could adjust that particular MIDI plugin, and it'll be controlled through a quick control, which can be automated. All right, so we have kind of further clarification from Esteban. Carlos Benson says, when I'm viewing the middle of a project with the cursor in the middle, I often need to move my cursor to the start of the project and also scroll towards the start. Don't know how to do it all at once. Okay, so I'll just come over. So say, all right, so let's say if I'm here in the project, and let's say so in the middle of the project, the cursor in the middle, I often need to move my cursor to the start of the project and also scroll towards the start. So if you just hit like the period key, so let's make sure that a follow is on. So I'm just gonna like hit the F key here, auto scroll. So let's say if I'm here and I'm playing measure 75, I'm just going to hit the period key on a numeric keypad, and that will take you to the beginning of the project, and that will keep playing. So if I'm like way over here, so we're playing, I hit the period key on a numeric keypad, it will just automatically go to the start of the project without having to move the playhead. So I could just, again, and let's say, okay, I'm fast forwarding, it's still playing at the original position. So, you know, so we could do stuff like that. So say, okay, we're playing, I want to fast forward to here. So I'm using just the, and if I just hit the minus key, I could rewind while it plays forward. But if you want to go to the head, just, hit the period key like on my numeric keypad between enter and 0, and that'll just take you right back in without interrupting playback. So Valley is just saying, yeah, I haven't tried to quick control. Thanks, Greg. Didn't know that's possible. So I got to learn it today too. So I usually learn new things on all of the live streams. All right. So I think I'm at the end of questions. Let's see if there's any that I may have missed, and we'll go through some of the other questions that were mailed in. All right, so I'm going to jump to some of the questions that were mailed in. Thanks for all the great questions from everyone. All right, see that we're at 105 likes. Thanks for all the likes. All right, so we had a question. How to create a lead sheet from chords in a chord track. Okay. So if you want to make a quick lead sheet for someone, okay, so say we have a project here. All right, so I'm going to create just a blank part. So I'm going to take like this whole project, and I'm just going to double click on a blank MIDI part, and we'll look at it, let's say, in our score editor. So I want to take the chords and create a lead sheet, but let's say like I don't have a chord track. I'm going to take the event here, and we'll go to our project menu to chord track, and we will choose, let's create chord events. So as we do this, all right, so now we have this. We'll go back to my empty part, and then all we have to do is go to scores, and we'll go to advanced layout, and we'll say show chord track. And now we could just have the chord track kind of laid out for us directly here in the score editor for us. So once again, once you're in the score part, just go to advanced layout and show chord track. Okay, so I think we got the next one. All right, so I think Patrick had a question last time, and I was kind of playing with it a bit more over the weekend. And I think when he had copied an event, maybe he wanted to delete. He had duplicated events and offset them, and he wanted to just delete a particular, like the second note in a number of different tracks. So let's say or different events that were copied. So let's say, and maybe they weren't shared copies. Okay, so let's say we're here, and I'll just put in quick sequence. All right, and I'm just going to take off the arpeggiator. Right, let me just set this to quarter notes. Okay, so let's say we have like this, and I wanted to delete like the second note in this repeated sequence over and over again, but they're not shared copies. Okay, so let's go to logical editor. So we'll go to MIDI, to logical editor. Maybe Patrick could chime in if this would work for his needs. So we want to choose to delete and we'll say notes, and we'll come over here and choose last event to every other event to event counter, and I'll say 2. Okay, so let me just and at that point you could just say I want to delete like every 6th note, every 5th note, and then you could just delete like the note that comes in second for that particular value. So try setting this up to event counter, and you could say, okay, I want to delete every 2nd note. So you could do stuff like that as well. All right. And we had another question from a live stream I was playing with, and it was about how to snap to a particular, like how to take my range selection tool that wasn't snapped and be able to snap it. So let's say if I'm here and I wanted to extend the range tool, and have it snap. So if we come over here, let's first just turn on the J key. So if we wanted to now have the arrange tool snap to beats, we can just extend this like so, but we could also nudge the entire range selection using the nudge command, and we could choose to nudge the end to the right, and we could have this automatically snap to the grid. And if we wanted the grid to be synced up, we could say link to the grid. So say our grid is to beats. So as we extend like to the right here, we could have this automatically extend the range like to the left or to the right like this, and have that snap automatically turned on. So we could take the range selection here on a particular event, and then if we wanted to nudge the range independently without affecting the underlying data underneath. All right. So we had a question. Do you know if there are any plans for Vari Audio to tune notes within a chord for polyphonic instruments like Melodyne, for example, a guitar that had a string out of tune while strumming chords? So a lot of times, other tools doesn't work that well because of the harmonic overtone series, but some people I know have done this successfully, and it can be it's obviously probably a lot less time to take the guitar and tune it and get a different performance, but sometimes we don't always have that option. So if we wanted to approach this using something like spectral layers, we could do this. Let me just import a quick audio file here. Okay, so let's just listen to it. So say we want to just come over here. Now what spectral layers allows you to do is spectral editing. So if we wanted to come over here, let's launch spectral layers. And what spectral editing is going to allow you to do is kind of more frequency dependent editing. So I'm just going to put it into kind of a composite view, and let's just come over here. So, what we're looking at is, again, kind of the frequencies. So as we want to, this is almost like taking the waveform on the side. So let's take a listen to like some of the guitar stuff. So we'll come. So let's say I want to take a note of the guitar here. So, the tricky thing is to get this to actually work with the harmonics selection. So if I want to select this particular note, we can now. So I could kind of isolate that note and its harmonics. So a lot of tools, you may isolate the note, but not the harmonics. And then if you adjust kind of the fundamental harmonic, at that point, everything is out of tune. But if we come to transform at this point, and you might have to do this for a number of different things, but this is going to be a tedious process overall. But we'll say, okay, let's get to our frequency shifting. So I want this up 2 hertz. We'll say okay. So now as we wanted to play that, we could, and let's do again our transform, and let's knock it up. Let's say 30 hertz. Hit okay. So now at this point, if we wanted to play the guitar, you could go through and find a particular notes, but most importantly, finding the actual harmonic overtone series and being able to adjust that. So you could just in spectral layers choose to do the harmonic selection as well. And then you could be able to kind of fix tuning issues when they need to be. All right. So I just see a question. Cubase doesn't currently support 32-bit VSTs. Is there a workaround for this that is safe? I still have many plugins that are great, but in 32-bit, Cubase automatically blacklists them. Also, some of them play as standalones. Is there a way to record a standalone app into Cubase on the same computer? Or will I have to take the output of another computer as an input into Cubase? All right, so if you want to run 32-bit VSTs, it's not advised. It can cause, a lot of system instability, but there is a solution called JBridge. And JBridge will allow you to bridge 32-bit VSTs into a 64-bit environment. So realize that could cause system instabilities. I mean, I know there's lots of plugins that just don't have a particular 64-bit equivalent, and this has been going on since, I think Cubase 8 or 8.5, so maybe almost 10 years now, where, we're transitioning out of 32-bit. But try JBridge for that. And with the second question, is there a way to record a standalone app into Cubase on the same computer, or will I have to take the output of another computer to the input in Cubase? So that could really depend on your audio interface. So sometimes you could have, if your audio interface is multi-client, sometimes you could take the output, like outputs 3 and 4, and send it to inputs 5 and 6, and have outputs 3 and 4 in a plugin and inputs 5 and 6 into Cubase. So you could do that, but you may not be able to send MIDI to it at the same time. So you have to have a multi-client MIDI and a multi-client audio and be able to kind of patch internally. And I would say a lot of audio interfaces don't have that capability or functionality. So you're probably better off trying the bridging approach if you need to. All right. So we had a question. When I solo a track and there's a MIDI instrument holding a note, drum loop, synth, is muted as the other tracks, but the audio from the MIDI instrument that's holding the long note don't come back after it's unmuted. Is there anything that could be done with the MIDI instrument track holding the long note, come back with audio after it's unmuted? So let's go ahead and try this real quick. I'll just... just. All right, so say I'll just hold a long note here. All right, so let's do that. So let's say, okay, I mute. Let's say I solo. So now let's see if I do it as a MIDI track, if that behaves differently, because it could be decoupled. So let's, okay, so we'll add, okay, so I'll just copy that same part up here. So we have our audio. And I'll just knock this up an octave. Okay, so now. Okay, so let's say we play this. So if I solo this track, then unsolo it. So it seems like it's coming back, you know, so I'll just reread it again. So it says holding a long note is muted with all the air tracks, but the audio from the MIDI instrument that's holding the long note doesn't come back after it's unmuted. So it said mute it, then unmute it. So it seems like that's kind of functioning as expected to me, but let me know. It seems like it did as described. All right, and I think we had one email that came in. All right, so we had a question. How do you make the locators not vertically highlight the tracks in your project? I see that's how you personally have them set up. All right, so if we have a project, and let's add a marker track here. All right, so let's say I drop markers in. All right, so we see that we have this preference here where the markers will be kind of shown vertically. I think there's just a preference. So let's come over here. Let's see if it's under display, markers, show marker track lines. Let's set this to off and see if they go away. So let's say, so now we don't see the markers there. If there's from the active marker track, we can say apply, and then all the marker tracks will just show up right there. All right, let's see. All right, reading an email that came in. All right, so I got Val Lee's question or a link about Steve Duda, so I'll check it out. All right, let me jump back to our live questions. Thanks again for all the great questions that people have asked. Okay. All right, wonderful to see Randy Lee on from Texas and Johnny D is also on. Thanks. Okay. Okay. So I just see a question. Hi, Greg. How did you create the MIDI fader profile for the Choy Sauce MIDI controller? Okay, so I'll delete it and I'll show you just how to make it. So the Choy Sauce controller that I use is just a like an 8. It's just kind of 8 faders. So we'll show you how to create this. Let me just. Okay, so I want to make a new controller, so I'll just come here, and this is how easy it is. I'll say, okay, let's add a vendor, and I'm going to call it Choy Sauce, name of the company. It's actually from Chuck Choi, who's a well-known power assistant in the Hollywood film community. All right, so it's a 100 is the model. All right, I'll take credit for creating the script, even though. And we'll set the MIDI in and output port. And now we're going to create our control surface. So it's 800 millimeter faders. So I'm going to select this to be a fader. And I'm going to visually orient it to be the same way. And I'm just going to now move fader 1, move fader 2, fader 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And now that I've done everything right, we want to go to the mapping assistant. So if I wanted to do this for focus quick controls, I could hit fader 1. That's going to be our function. I'll say let's assign quick control 1. I touch fader 2, double click, fader 3, fader 4, fader 5, double click on the parameter that I want assigned to it. And now I've just created the script, for I could open this up and go to my quick controls. And let's say, okay, I just want this to be for my volume. And now those are just doing my quick controls. If I open up a particular plugin on the track, I can come over here. So now that the plugin has focus, I can control. My quick controls are doing it for the plugin. If I select the track, that's the active window. Now all my quick controls are for the track, just like that. So that's how easy it is to kind of make a particular remote control for you. So. All right. So you see from Michael Pierce. Oh, a simple little question I've had mind blank on. When quantizing MIDI, how do you quantize both the beginning and end of a note? I've been playing with arpeggiators recently. All right. All right. So let me just come here. I'll just. Okay, so let's say I'll just put in some. I'll just have this start at the beginning of the measure here. All right. All right, so let's say these are all kind of randomly off. Let me just turn off my snap. Okay, so if I wanted to take, I'll just take these notes. So let's say I wanted to quantize. So I think you might have to do it as two different values. So let's go to, we'll open up my quantized value. So let's say I want these to be quantized, the attack to quarter notes. So when I come here, we can now quantize that. And then we could quantize, if you go to advanced quantize, we could choose to quantize the MIDI lengths. So let's say I want my quantize to be set now to my lengths to be half notes. So we could, at this point, just, so we'll just say quantize, advanced quantize, and quantize event lengths. And they'll all now be half notes. But if they're all short before, so let's say they're all kind of in between, I could just say, let's quantize. So we could quantize the length of the note, but if we wanted to quantize based on the event ends, we can now extend the ends as well. So it's probably a two-step process, Michael. And then you should be able to accomplish both. You could even put it into a macro if you wanted to. See Gerald Ely saying range selection, that's his tip for the day. All right, so we see from Patrick, while working on projects, if suddenly doubt occurred, if I couldn't find solutions anywhere, what can I do? As you know, I'm new to Cubase. I'm working on projects. It's do or die for me. So any solutions, Greg? So if you go to the CubaseIndex.com, I think it's over 23,000 topics that we've covered in the live streams. So that's always a wonderful resource where, there's a good chance that people have asked the same questions. You could always, email me as well. You send me an email to clubcubase@steinberg.de. But I think you'll live if you don't find an immediate response, but there's probably a good chance, and that's going to be covered in one of the 23,000 questions. But there's also a bunch of tutorials on the Cubase Nation Discord and YouTube. All right, so a question. All right, let me just set this up. It's from Johnny D. Hi, Greg. So the only way to use the nudge function is if you select and split the event. So if we're, if we have the range selected and we nudge, we can nudge the particular event here. I'll just zoom in more. So we could, what we have selected now is the active component is the range selection. So if I wanted to nudge the event, if I hit Shift X, then I could select the event and nudge the event if I wanted to. So I could say, okay, let's just take the beginning, extend it out, or take the end here. And let's say I want to take the ending of that particular event, and then we could nudge. But realize that it's kind of two different layers. So when we're doing this, we don't have the event selected. We can, as soon as we move this, then that particular event can be selected. So if you wanted to move it, that may not be the most practical kind of editing environment. But if I move it here, then we could say, okay, now I want to select this. And if we have kind of the combo tool, I could say, okay, let's move I'll just split something out here so make it easier to see. All right, so if we come here, so now as we nudge, it's the range that we're choosing. But if we just, so here we're in the nudge and here we're at the bottom. And now I could just nudge and kind of switch back and forth depending on what mode I'm in. So if I wanted to nudge the range, or if I wanted to split and then just nudge the event, so you could just hit Shift X and then you could nudge the event just like that. But realize that, the range selection could be applicable to the selection range. You say, I just want this a little more over, or it could be applicable to the events. So you may have to kind of work between the two different modes depending on what is actually selected. See, Valley is saying Spectral Layer is the secret agent of Cubase. All right. We just see a question. Hello, hopefully not too late to the party. Is there a function in Cubase to show a Cubase background gray for the Mac version of Cubase? In my case, I see the desktop the whole time working in Cubase. So I'm not sure if, so once you do a project, so if you see the desktop, so let's say like Cubase is my active program, but I don't have any project selected. So if you go to new project, let's say create empty and choose a folder, then you should have kind of like the Cubase project that's gray and not see the desktop. So let me know if that makes sense or if I'm misunderstanding. All right. All right. So we see Jay from Connecticut at Secret Studios. Thanks for joining us today. Glad you can make it. All right. So we see from Patrick question on Studio Drummer VST played, recorded for entire song. I rendered in gain stage, but when kick appears in some places, it's peaking. Is there any way to select only the peaking place and reduce gain? So I would check to see, if it's, let's say MIDI part. So let's just come over here. All right, I'll revert this quickly. All right, so a lot of times, if it's going to be MIDI data, so let's say, let me just make sure. Okay, so if it's MIDI data, so there could be other things that makes the drum, that could be like if they're being sent to like a, different processing. But, if I had like a particular drum that was peaking, the first thing I would do if it was in the MIDI domain is go into like the drum editor itself. And MIDI gives us a lot of flexibility with, okay, I want to go to the kick drum, so you may just, where you hear it peaking, is just adjust the velocity level down. So say I want to take my kick. So it could be often very easy. The easiest solution may be just to check the velocity of the MIDI drum and make sure that that is kind of in line. So I would always, and that's why you have such flexibility and why, working with MIDI drums is great, is that you have so much control over velocity so that each note can be absolutely perfect. So I would approach it as a MIDI solution as opposed to looking for an audio solution. I realize that often it could be just the velocity is too hot for that one particular note, and that would be the easiest fix to have more consistency. Okay, so Patrick was saying, Greg, thank you. In a logical editor, deleting middle notes. I was searching for this again. Thank you. All right. All right. Hi, Greg. Is there a way to move all the mix console faders all at the same time without using the link faders? Thanks. So there's a couple approaches. So if you need to move the faders, it's obviously kind of the easiest way is to link. So you don't necessarily have to do, so I'll just revert this. So, if you don't want to permanently link faders, there is, so if I'm here, and I could just hold down Alt or Option plus Shift, and then all of them will be like put into quick link. So that way it's not permanently linked. It's just when we come right over here, we could link all the channels, but that is a link. We could also select all of the tracks here and add a VCA fader to the selected channels. In essence, it's creating a link to the VCA, but if you don't want to physically link, you could do that. If you wanted to select all of the events, let's say we're in like the large mixer, we could go to the pre section, and if you wanted to again do a quick link and adjust kind of the gain for multiple tracks at once, up or down, you could do that. But kind of, I think usually by nature, selecting multiple events and moving them together, a link is not a bad solution. So, but if there's a particular reason, but you don't necessarily have to place it into a permanent link. You could use the Alt or Option plus Shift, and then be able to just have a link that, there's no consequences of. It just kind of gives you the benefit of a link without any of the downsides. Yeah. All right. All right. So Valley is asking, is there a VS2 VST3 host, you could recommend using it on voice chats. I want to auto-tune my Zoom calls, so I think, I know if you do it, it could be up to the host application, but I think if you go into settings here, like in OBS, even that you could add VST plugins. But you could, I'm sure, do a clever routing thing if you really needed to have auto-tune for your Zoom calls. Yeah, I see Jazz Dude mention the same thing, that you could add VST plugins. I think it's VST2. All right, we'll see if there's any more questions that kind of pop up. I think we're at the end of questions. I want to thank everyone for all the great questions that were sent in. We'll see if there's any more that pop in. If not, we could wrap up a little early. We'll just see. I want to thank everyone for all the great questions. I hope that everyone's learned a new tip or trick. And one other thing with for Valley's question on OBS, or with Zoom, I know earlier versions of Zoom. Let's see if I open it up. That you could send. Yeah, there was kind of like a Zoom driver here that's in older versions. I'm not sure if it's still supported, but it used to be that you could send your DAW directly to Zoom. It wasn't very reliable. There's some issues with it, crashing a lot. So Nick wants me to wrap up early and phone Peter back. So. All right, let's just give it a couple more minutes. If not, we'll go wrap up a little bit before we get barraged with bots. All right, so we have a question just popped in. I seem to have a problem with Cubase. Sometimes when running a big project, I get freezes and pops, but Cubase is almost not using any system resources. Can I make Cubase use more than 20 to 30%? Thanks. So you realize that system resources and audio real-time performance are very different. So, so one of the things you could do is make sure that as you're doing this, that, when you select your audio interface under studio to studio setup, that we have the control panel and that your buffer size is raised up. So you could try raising that. Now, depending on your system, if, we have one track that has, let's say 16 different inserts on it, realize that one track is only going to be able to, and every DAW will work this way, one track can talk to one CPU core. So if you have one track with 16 plugins on it, that can make your Cubase kind of come to a crawl while you look at your CPU meter in the operating system. That's not really a good indication of what's happening with your actual audio performance. So if you do this now, also if you have a multi-timbral virtual instrument, so let's say we have something like Howling and Sonic SE. As we work on this, a lot of multi-timbral instruments, also one instrument uses one CPU cord. So if you have 12 or 16 cores in your computer and you have 16 instruments loaded, 16 different sounds, all playing back from one single instance, that could also make your Cubase come to a crawl because one CPU is being killed. Some programs are smart, like Hallian Sonic and Hallian Sonic SE, where it has multi-core support. So most plugins don't have this. So you could, there's ways that, loading up a particular project could be, even with 1 or 2 tracks, but depending on how you allocate the resources can really affect the overall quality of your actual, can really affect the audio performance of your particular system. Even though, you look at your CPU meter, it, doesn't look like it's totally, doing anything, or like, oh, I have a lot more. So check that out. All right, so we see a question from Patrick. Says, on a quantized panel, we see MIDI CC. What's that for, and what's the pros and cons if I change all modulation to automation? Okay, so let's get to the quantized panel. Just hide my nudging here. Okay, so this is, if you go to MIDI CC, that you could quantize the actual MIDI CC data. So, but that's only going to affect it, like, after. So let's say if we had a Hallian Sonic project here and we had a MIDI CC value that, I'll just turn my snap off. And so now we'll just say, okay, I draw on a modulation before the beat. So now if I include this and we have our grids at the half notes, that when we want to quantize, I think that we can quantize the MIDI CC data if we wanted to. So that way you could have it occur before, just like that. So that's what the MIDI CC is for. All right, let's see if there's any other questions. Okay, I guess we have a follow-up question from Patrick. What's the pros and cons if I change all the modulation to automation? So, if you wanted to go to the MIDI, and you could go to the CC automation setup. And here, we could, and this is sometimes people will, in earlier versions, there could be more flexibility for editing. Some people like different editing techniques from MIDI CCs in the MIDI key editor, and some people maybe that were more audio based, like traditional automation handling, so we could merge the two. So in previous cases, like there wasn't, like if you want to do, Bezier curves, you could use automation for that, and you could, do some different elements with, selecting multiple events. You could, the MIDI CCs will always kind of play back and will be stored within a part. So if you're exchanging data with MIDI files to other users, probably using MIDI CCs is better because that data will always be able to be played back and carried over. Whereas the automation could maybe not get carried over when exporting a MIDI file to someone else. All right, so Nick is heading off and wants to wish me a mocha for while I'm sorting out the time stamping tonight for the index. All right. All right, see if there's any other questions coming up. If not, we'll wrap up a little early. And we'll be doing this again on Friday. I was just looking at the calendar. I think that we'll have our last live stream 2 weeks from today on the 20th. So probably people will be busy over the holidays. We will usually have like the 23rd. So I think the last live stream of the month will be December 20th. So I just want to let everyone know about that. We'll take a little break over the holidays. I'll take some time off from work. But if not, we will go ahead and we'll give it another minute and we'll wrap up. I want to thank everyone for all the great questions. We hope that everyone learned something. And if you do, make sure you hit the like button and that you subscribe to the YouTube channel. All right. Okay, so with that, I think we're out of questions. Thanks again. Too bad Agent K wasn't here today. I would get my little trophy for getting through all the questions. But everyone, please stay safe and healthy, and we'll see everyone back on Friday. Thank you very much.